Hello, fellow creatives. Welcome back to our series on how to develop your documentary film idea. And today we're talking about how to plan your documentary process.
Yeah. I mean, I don't love planning as much as you do, but I think it has huge benefits. So we're going to be breaking down a few things. We're going to be talking about the fundamentals of working out your timelines, how you block that out, and having some consideration for the financing process in your timeline so that you've accommodated for that.
And look, one of the reasons I think we should just explain that why I think it's so important to do the planning is because if you know, so many creatives, I hear them saying, oh, I don't want to plan, it inhibits my creative process, and I don't want to be restricted by timelines. But the problem is if you don't have some kind of plan, it can just go on and on and on, and you just never finish.
It can become a black hole that you are sucked into. And I think part of what this series is all about for me is really inspiring you guys to develop yourselves into sustainable careers so that you're really doing the work that you love in a way that's sustainable, that's not killing you creatively, personally, financially. And there are too many stories of filmmakers that have fallen by the wayside, and it doesn't have to be like that.
No, it doesn't. So with a bit of planning, you can avoid all of that. And I think it was Benjamin Franklin has this great quote where he says something along the lines of, I'm totally misquoting.
Ask the big guy.
Ask the big guy. What did Benjamin Franklin say about planning to fail?
If you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah, that's it. I'm glad he said it because I was going to muddle that one up.
He makes a good point. So the first step in working out your timelines, I think it's always helpful to come back to audience, who they are, where you're going to reach them, because I think it really needs to be built into your master plan, because often you want to start building that audience almost from the beginning of the process. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree, because the more you can build your audience right from the start, the more people who are going to be really engaged when you actually come to releasing your film.
So if you haven't done this bit yet, define your ideal audience and then think about how you can start building the audience now. And even for films that are really aiming to reach really broadly, big Marvel films, for example, they know their core audience, and this is why they spend so much time doing pre-release marketing activities at events
dropping
like Comic-Con.
all those little teasers to kind of get you excited, 2 years before the film's even due to come out.
Yeah, because they know that core audience is going to be super important to their broad reach and getting the word of mouth going at the right time. Which brings us to the next bit, which is about what are you making? What's the duration? What's the platform? Why is that important to timelines?
I think understanding how long your film's going to be is important, because if you're making a feature-length film, you're going to be wanting to put that out, presumably in either cinemas or through hosted screenings. And so you need to know you're making that in order to plan out how much production you're going to need to do to create enough content to even fill a feature film.
Yep, if you're making a series, it's going to take longer. You're producing more content. But not all series are made equal. Some are much more formulaic and formatted, so that means you're going to pick up efficiencies in the way that you're making it, and that's going to save you time. So really starting to define what's your duration, what format are you working in, and what platforms are you targeting for primary release is really helpful. So for example, with feature film releases, I think it's super helpful to think about day and date release.
Yeah, so day and date's really helpful, because if there's a day, like for example, we've released quite a few different films over the years on the topic of cancer, and so World Cancer Day has been a really topical day and date for us to build audiences, and everyone's really, everyone in that world is really thinking about it at that time, which makes it really topical.
Yeah, so we might have tapped into audiences early who are interested in the field of cancer control and conquering cancer, and started telling them about our release well ahead of time, because we know that many people want to gather together and run events on that day and date, the 4th of February each year. So that can be really helpful. And I know one of our films actually had about 300 screenings on a day and date release on that day and date. That's a really strong platform to launch a film from, and you can generate a lot of momentum off that. If you picked another day and date, it may not be as successful. I think you want to watch out for times that are festive seasons, for example, or when people are on holidays, and maybe much more likely to see blockbusters than the type of films that you're making. So think it through and pick a point in time. That's really going to help to define your timeline as well.
Yeah, so once you've picked that point in time, then this formula that I really enjoy using, because I find it really effective, can really come into play, and that's X to Y by when. So if we use the example of World Cancer Day, we can say we need to start development, which is X, and we've got to get it into distribution, which is Y, and then the by when is World Cancer Day.
4th of February in 2 years.
In 2 years' time.
Yeah.
And so then you've got a starting timeline, and from there you can break it down. You can go, okay, I've got to do development, I've got to do pre-production, production, post-production, and release. And then you have some kind of structure for it.
Yeah, and I think you want to get as nuanced and as detailed as you can in setting little milestones along the way. So you want to also be conscious of how you're going to finance the film, and really thinking about those market alignments and people who are going to get behind realising this, so that you're not subsidising the whole production yourself. You're able to raise your full production budget and more for marketing and outreach ideally. So you want to be thinking about that this early in the process, because that also takes some time. Sometimes there are funding rounds, sometimes there are financial periods to keep in mind about when you're able to actually access that funding. So that'll go into the first block, of financing, which is often part of your development timeline. Then you're going to move into the other stages.
Yeah, and I think once you have all of this planned out, it just makes it so much easier, because then you get the little wins along the way, which will really help you, feel motivated to keep going. Which is, okay, great, I've got my development, I've done that phase, I met my deadline, now I'm moving into pre-production. So it's a really good way to kind of keep you on track, and also just put structure and form to what you're trying to achieve.
I think it gives a lot of confidence to the people who are going to support you on this journey, be it your collaborators or your funders and your distributors, etc., to have a really detailed plan at this point in time. Other things to be conscious of, things that can be time consuming, like attaching talent, getting certain types of permissions. If you've got to film in a particular season, because you're filming in the snow or in high summer, for example, during your production period, are going to help you pinpoint those dates. Allowing enough time for the various steps in post-production, your picture editing, and then allowing time for your sound editing and your colour grading and your original score and your mastering. They're all little milestones that need to happen within the broader X to Y by when for post-production.
Yeah, so it was a good little milestone you brought up there. You were talking about, seasons, and we're actually developing a project at the moment which is really critical to the seasons, and that's really informed our production plan, which is because the topic's skin cancer. So being that we're here in Australia, we need to film it during the Australian summer, and that has helped us really map out how we're going to put it all together.
Well, that's true, but the stories we're capturing are also in Europe and the US, so we also need to be conscious of when their high summer is and making sure we've built that in. So we're going to have this extended production period that essentially goes for a year across 2 summers.
So hopefully through this episode we have convinced you that planning is worthwhile, and that you'll actually sit down and maybe think about how you're going to plan out your own project. And then next week, we are doing a whole episode on how to conquer imposter syndrome. And I love this topic because I think it's a really important one, and it's going to be really fun to unpack.
All right, see you next week, imposters.
Don't forget to subscribe.